Now, to introduce our forum speakers, please welcome the managing partner from Plant Moran, Robert Shenton.
Thank you, Carol, and thank you, Jane. This is always a wonderful evening, and for Plant Moran, I believe this is around our 10th year having hosted this annual meeting here tonight, and every year the program gets better and better, the crowd gets bigger and bigger, and we've got a great treat in store for us here tonight. I love the way that they branded this several years ago, and Jane was part of this, and it was the most fun you've ever had at an annual meeting. And so it's kind of like the world's largest cocktail party. You couldn't really say it anymore, but we do have fun here at the Metropolitan Club meetings. And again, Plant Moran not only is pleased to sponsor the program, we're also the audit firm. So when you look at the numbers and you see the numbers, we've got some responsibility in that as well. And so I don't know about you, but there's words that come to mind when you come to a Columbus Metropolitan Club forum. Things maybe like topical, informative, cultural, entertaining, business, political, community, but most importantly, relevant. And I don't know about you, but every time that I come to a Metropolitan Club forum, I leave feeling like I learned something, and I'm more committed to coming back and participating in more forums. It's why we've got such a great crowd here tonight. It's why we're an engaged, collaborative community. And you've heard about this thing called the Columbus Way. It's a real thing, and I'm guessing you might hear a little more about it tonight, but it's also representative of the Metropolitan Club. We're part of the Columbus Way. So congratulations, Jane. Congratulations, CMC team, CMC board, for all the great things that you do, as well as all the members. You are what makes this a great organization. So now, on to the program. We've got no strangers here tonight. I think everybody in the room knows who's up here on stage, and so we'll be quick. We're going to hear both from the Columbus Partnership, Alex Fischer, their president and CEO, as well as Columbus 2020, and Kenny McDonald, president and chief economic officer. Also on stage is Doug Buchanan from Business First. Kenny and Alex are going to kind of give their overview of the organizations and what's going on, and then Doug's going to have a chance to ask some questions before we get to our CMC infamous question time. So, ladies and gentlemen, enjoy Alex, Kenny, Doug.
Thank you, Robert, and it's great to be here. It's always fun to be on the stage at the CMC. I remember doing it 11 or 12 years ago for the first time, and I said it then, and I've always said it every time that I've been here. This is so special. I think that this organization really is representative of everything that is good in Columbus. If you think about its history, a group of Columbus women who wanted to form a group of curiosity, that's a trait that we live by at the partnership, of commitment, of knowledge, and now it is all these years later grown into this great forum. When visitors come into our city, I have one today, my mother-in-law is in from Douglas, Arizona. It gives me my great opportunity to actually try to explain to her what I do, and obviously Lori, who's always with me. I thought she was going to be the furthest visitor, but then Congresswoman Deborah Price slipped in, her friend from Paris, so I think that's even gotten it beat. So turn around for just a minute and just look out the window on this beautiful day as the sun sets on this fabulous city. It is another reminder of how fortunate we are to live in this great place. So. Tonight we can celebrate, whether we're in our city or cities all over the country, economic prosperity. And while there's still a job undone to make sure that the boats in our country are lifting everybody into that economic prosperity, we have reason to celebrate. But I'm going to take you back a decade ago, and it wasn't always the case. A decade ago, we as a business community, as political leaders in Columbus, and leaders all over the country were in the worst economic recession, certainly in our lifetime and in our nation's history. People weren't sure where the bottom was. There wasn't confidence. There wasn't confidence in nonprofits, in government, in business growth. We weren't sure whether or not we were going to be able to create new jobs then, or whether high unemployment was the new normal here in our city. It's often been said, never let a good crisis go to waste. And I would say that is one of the rallying points back then, a rallying point of a few CEOs inside the Columbus Partnership, rallying points by elected leaders like Mayor Michael B. Coleman, and civic leaders. Because one thing that I think Kenny and I would acknowledge is this isn't about the two of us. It's not about our organizations. It's about all the collaborators that do represent the Columbus Way. That group, though, in those earliest days, and I remember it, it was sort of like a guy on a desk and a couple of consultants and a few leaders asking some questions. But over time, we were joined with hundreds, if not thousands, of civic leaders around a new vision and an aspiration that said we could create jobs and that we could raise incomes and we could have record level of investment here in our community. I remember those hundreds of leadership roundtable discussions. Many of you all were with us in the old Squire Sanders law firm, law library, in which we were debating what the goals and aspirations could be. There were two fundamental questions that we were asking. The first was, could we, with a bias for action, have the greatest decade of growth in Columbus's history? The greatest decade of growth, that was a question. And secondly, could we, with regional collaboration, not just the city of Columbus, but this entire region that now represents over 2 million people, could we rise to national prominence in economic development circles? Well, I'll tell you here tonight, very definitively, we can answer those two questions with a resounding yes. For hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people in this region, we have improved lives together, not as any individual person or any individual organization. We set forth the Columbus 2020 Regional Growth Strategy. We launched it in 2010 as a plan to achieve a set of 10-year aggressive goals. If you'll remember, we called it Columbus 2020, and then we added an exclamation point. Now, we sort of dropped the exclamation point. I think we should bring it back, Kenny. There it is, the original one. And then we had these funky colors as well that changed over time. But we set a series of audacious goals. We said we're going to create 150,000 net new jobs. We're going to have $8 billion of capital investment, and we're going to raise personal incomes by 30%. And as of May of this year, despite all the chuckles, despite all the cynicism 10 years ago, people who were saying there's no way that we could do those, in May of this year, Kenny came into my office. I actually still choke up every time I say it. Kenny walked in and he said, "We did it. We just surpassed 150,000 net new jobs." And we both shed a tear that day because it was amazing to think about 150,000 families that are better off, to think about the growth in the community. And 8 years later, we have not $8 billion of capital investment, but $10 billion of capital investment. And if you'll remember an old chart that said we were dramatically behind in personal incomes, today we're now even with the country, but there's still a whole lot of work to do on that front. We couldn't imagine what could be achieved 10 years ago when we were worried about what the new normal was. And now, actually, today, we take it for granted. And by the way, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think we should take for granted that this is a great city, that we have economic prosperity that is in front of us. But what we can't take for granted is that you don't have to continue to work really, really hard. Consider that in the last 8 years, Columbus became the second largest city in the Midwest, second only to Chicago. That we're the 14th largest city in the nation. Surrounding counties like Delaware, Union, Licking County are growing at unprecedented rates. And we learned how to win, a winning attitude. When my mother-in-law came through the airport, she could have seen that winning attitude in the branding of Columbus. How could you miss it? And yet that wasn't around a decade ago. No longer do we say, can we do that? Rather, we say, we can absolutely do it and we will win with anything that we set our sights on. Mayor Coleman used to challenge us to have swagger. And I guarantee you we are now a city that is beginning to earn its swagger. When Mayor Ginther came or called me one day and said, I believe we should compete for smart cities, there were cities around the country that were chuckling, but no longer were our own residents chuckling because they believed that we could win, and in fact, we did win. Back then, the partnership was 12 CEOs. We're now 75 CEOs. We have hundreds of investors in Columbus 2020, and we have hundreds more involved in our work. That makes us stronger. The Harvard Business School has written a business case study that they teach to leaders around the world. I talked to one of the professors yesterday. On Friday, as a part of the Bloomberg Mayors Conference, they will be teaching the Columbus Way to mayors from all over the world at the Kennedy School at Harvard. An unwavering commitment, they teach, of business leaders working with government in a tone of civility. Carol, it actually sounds like the CMC, the Columbus Way. Now, as we head into the completion, we're not going to let up. This isn't a victory lap. This is a sprint to the finish line, but this is, as Les Wexner said, simply the end of the beginning, because there is so much more work to be done. So we're asking ourselves a whole new set of questions. And we're going to continue to ask and debate over the next 6 to 9 months these questions. Can industries cross the technological divide and innovate fast enough to keep up with global competition? We're a city that has big companies, more per capita than most cities do. Which ones won't exist a decade from now or 2 decades from now? Consider when we were debating the launch of Columbus 2020, this little device was also being launched. And now it's on version 11, and it controls our lives, and it's set a whole nother paradigm. It's a symbol of the innovation that is occurring. Will we keep up as Columbus in an era of amazing innovation? Will we meet the national workforce challenge? I'll tell you, in my opinion, economic development of the future is all about workforce. It is a talent war, and I believe that we are positioned to be able to win, but only if we think about things differently. Will we dare to say we're going to lift up economically our most vulnerable residents? Will we dare to say that? Would we dare to put that into practice? By the way, we believe one of the best ways to do that is with a good job. But to have a good job requires a lot of other dynamics that you've got to have. Can we advance a forward-thinking plan to grow this city by 500,000 people? How about 1 million people? And with it, what will the choices that we make in terms of long-range master planning look like? And can we unleash the concentration of higher education? How many times have you heard that over the last several decades? I see Joe Aludo smiling on that one. I still think we have work to do, and that is not a criticism. I think it's this great opportunity of truly unleashing 150,000 college students that woke up this morning in Columbus. And I have an even bigger question, and that is a question for the 22nd century. A day in which nobody in this room by the actuarial tables will have any chance of being here. I'm certain that the CMC will be prevailing. I'm certain that the skyline will look very, very different. Maybe this room's been renovated a couple of times thereafter. But here's the question. will there be a new generation of citizens, government leaders, CEOs, civic leaders that are committed to values and principles that are espoused in the Columbus way? Because if we'll keep our aspirations set on those values and principles, and if we'll practice them, if we'll teach them, if we'll pass them to those who come next, all of these short-term challenges that are ahead of us will take care of themselves. That is the differential in a place called Columbus, a place that is recognized for unprecedented collaboration and civility called the Columbus Way, and is having amazing economic success. So I'm going to transition to that success. You know, occasionally you get things right in your professional life. And one of those occasions was the dinner that Kenny McDonald and I had 8 or 9 years ago. And absolutely, bar none, the most important thing a CEO can do is put a team together and hire great people. I was probably a little lucky, but we stumbled across an old colleague and was able to convince him to move his family to Columbus. And this is a big statement in my professional career. That's the best move I've ever made, that single move. But it's not only about Kenny. It's about a team that he put together. It's about the rest of the team at the Columbus Partnership that works well, that complements each other, that doesn't put their own interest ahead of themselves. Kenny has come into this community when there was simply a plan and a little bit of funding to fund that plan, and has done the hard work to put the team together that has spanned this country, that spanned this globe. I can't imagine how many miles they have in their frequent flyer accounts, and has done the hard work of making sure that those audacious goals that we were setting some 10 years ago, and as we set them into action 8 years ago, have not only been met, they've been exceeded, and we're just getting started, because this is simply the end of the beginning. And I am proud that at the end of that beginning, that Kenny is here, and all the members of his team and our broader team at the partnership, all in partnership on this very, very important work. So, ladies and gentlemen, Kenny McDonald.
Well, first of all, thank you, Alex, and never ask that guy to intro you. Yeah, there's no good follow. I want to thank CMC too. You guys have just been terrific. Even the programming just this year has been unreal. The move over here has been fantastic, and I'm sitting here staring at this view. I could stare at that all night as well. I can't follow Alex's passion on it. I share it. I'll only try to take it a little deeper and put a finer point on it, and maybe set the conversation with Doug up a little bit more. We are, in fact, doing a ton of work, once again, to examine ourselves economically, demographically, socially, so that we understand where we need to go over this next 10 or 12 years. And this first slide kind of reminds us of 10 years ago, and AIG and Berkshire and all of the things that happened that put this economy in a real tailspin, that caused communities all across the country to have to respond and do things differently. Most of them had a short-term crisis and did a few things. Columbus had a crisis and did some huge things. Changed their entire platform and their approach to the world. So it's not just an economic development platform, it is how we actually speak to the world. And I want to thank Alex for his leadership, and there's hundreds of other people that helped launch, many of which have stuck with it the entire time. So thank you. I see our investors and our team all over the audience tonight. The headlines are quite different today. You saw this headline from Inc. magazine yesterday, and we were joking that it's not just going to be a great destination, it already is a great destination. We would have killed for that article in 2010 or 2011, maybe even 2012. We maybe take it for granted now that that's happening on a month in, month out, maybe even every week about our region. I wanted to show a little data just in case you didn't believe Alex and everything he said, first of all, we want to look at our neighbors in the Midwest because we're also big proponents of the Midwest. We think this is a booming area. We think there's huge opportunity here. And we also think we have a great number of peer cities in the Midwest. We are ranking at the top of a lot of these lists. Fastest job growth, nationally number 17. Fastest population growth in the Midwest. Okay, among Minneapolis, great cities below us in the Midwest, but number 13 in the U.S., just some context for us. GDP growth, what are we producing out of our region? Number one among a whole host of cities in the Midwest, and number 8 in the country in GDP growth, and the velocity of that is been very rapid. I think it's $136 billion now every year, surpassing Indianapolis just a few weeks ago under the new measurements. This may surprise some people in the audience. We are one of the top locations in the country for millennials. Not only do we have 150,000 enrolled college students in our region, many more of them are staying than ever before, and quite frankly, more are moving here from places like Chicago than are moving to Chicago now. We've reversed the trends in a lot of different ways, and that is something to be incredibly proud of. That's all a national figure. When we started the journey, some of the companies that are adding jobs and revitalizing our neighborhoods and our cities didn't exist. If you drive down and see what Rogue's done to develop an entire neighborhood, and you see what Cover My Meds and Root are doing, and dozens of startups that we have in our region that are starting to add hundreds of jobs, they didn't exist. Who in 2025 is going to be on that list? I suspect we might not know, but if we toured Rev 1, we might start to get an inkling of the kinds of people that will start to emerge from that, or Children's Hospital and the great startups that continue to come out of there. We've also done the big stuff, right? Huge manufacturing facilities. We're celebrating next week with Sofidel, a major Italian company. They're bringing 500 companies to town to celebrate with them their grand opening of this giant facility in Circleville. And they're busing everybody back to Columbus to have all of those people celebrate with them some sustainability awards that they're winning here. Major investment. Amazon data centers, Facebook data centers, headquarters, office buildings in the short north, physical structures that remind everybody that we're a growing place. Orange cones and cranes are a beautiful thing if you're an economic developer, right? But you know what? We don't have blinders on, and we're looking at the things we got to work on too. Too much of our wealth is concentrated like a lot of our competitor cities, and if you're born poor in our city, you often remain that way throughout your lifetime, and we have an opportunity to get at that and fix that, and we're addressing it. We'll be talking about it. It's coming up in all of our stakeholder meetings, and it's something that we think we can address in economic development with all of our partners in the communities. And we have things that are, not socially oriented. We go to Madison County or places like that. They have great facilities, great companies there, and individually maybe they have service, but the residents in those communities don't have broadband access just 20 minutes from where we sit today. There's things like that that we can fix, that we can get after, that are man-made issues that can be solved with effort and collaboration and dialogue. And we're looking at those competitive forces. We have a group from Austin, Texas, that's actually helping us with this every day, looking at technology, looking at economic trends around the world, looking at very severe demographic trends around the world that do have an impact on our companies, and every one of them all create opportunity too. Finally, if I ask myself, if we accomplished a few things by 2030, let's pick a date, maybe not a name or an exclamation point, too hard to email, but let's ask ourselves, what would success look like? We want to grow. So in hundreds and hundreds of stakeholder meetings this year, where communities are asking themselves in Nashville or Austin, do we want to continue to grow? What I hear from residents of Columbus from every corner is, absolutely, we want to continue to grow. We want to bring more talented people here. We want jobs for our kids and our grandkids in our community. We want more venture capital investment. We want to continue to grow. That's not the case everywhere these days. We obviously have capacity to innovate. So what's coming out of Nationwide Children's and OSU now is creating a biotech sector that we didn't have 10 years ago, or was nanas. It didn't exist hardly at all visibly. Those kinds of things we can really leverage, and there's billions of dollars for our economy to be gained. Investment is critically important. We not only need venture capital in our community, but we need it to be invested in our communities. And we need to continue to create places so that we can build those office buildings and put manufacturing clients and cloud computing centers in our communities and build a sustainable tax base. Finally, we need to extend individual opportunity. So most cities are achieving growth these days if we look across the U.S. And while we're doing quite well, I just showed you a statistic that we should all be alarmed by and think that we can do better. And we need to get opportunity to every part of our region, our rural communities, our urban communities, and use the capacity and all the individuals and talent that we have in the region. Finally, we got a lot of work to continue to be prepared for all of this growth. If I travel around the country, again, most cities are doing well, and the conversation is, my commute's getting longer. It's a little tougher to move around town. I have to pick what side of town to live on. And there are housing crises all over the country with housing capacity. And we have an opportunity to get at those issues too. So we're as motivated as ever about the next decade, and we're thinking about it, we're researching it, we're building frameworks, and we're just so proud to actually get to do that work every day with all of you. With that, we'll turn it over to Doug for some questions.
So as I suspected when I saw the agenda tonight, I have time for one question.
We timed it just right.
Kenny, I do want to start with you. You have an expiration date in your name, in your organization's name. So as you then try to figure out what you are going to do beyond 2020, expand on some of what you were ending there with. Affordable housing, transportation, poverty, kind of the human side of this. Like, why is that important for economic development from what you're hearing from the companies that you're dealing with?
Well, it's really all about workforce. Talent is the fuel that makes any company work these days in any of the industries that we're talking to. Everybody is hunting for the places that they're going to get a sustainable talent pool. Right. And they have to have housing capacity to house them. They want them. They don't want them in their car stuck in traffic. They want them in the building, being productive for the company and producing profit. And that's just an economic way to look at it. What is maybe even more true is that they want happy workers and productive workers. And we don't want to turn these great mid-sized cities in the country into Los Angeles. Right. I mean, we have a great opportunity. These are wonderful places and a huge advantage. We need to really work to retain it. If we could keep our growth rate the same or increase it and our commute times went down, that would be quite a measure over the next 10 years. Right.
Alex, you want to approach that?
Well, I think that, as Kenny says, we've got to be doing everything that we can to think about long-range, planning. So I think something that we have to get after over the next several decades is thinking about that growth agenda and how it cuts into the physical environment. Mm-hmm. I've often commented I would have loved to have met Governor Rhodes, and I'm sure people wondered about his sanity when he was building a ring road around Columbus through a bunch of cornfields, and it doesn't look so silly now. But yet I don't see visionaries from an infrastructure standpoint that are planning the next set of investments. They're probably going to look very, very different as technology changes, but nonetheless, where are they going? How are we going to manage growth? What will it mean to the future? Must be an agenda item and is something that we at the partnership are, very much committed to.
Okay, I do want to follow up on that real quick, but I am obligated to remind everybody that there will be time for questions, so be sure that you are thinking of them, and we'll turn that over here in a few minutes. There's a microphone right in the middle there for you to ask your questions, and we'll get to that. Alex, one other thing kind of that I don't think of as traditional economic development, but I heard a colleague of yours give a presentation the other day about civility, and it just struck me that was kind of an odd approach for an economic development organization to be advocating for civility and saying that was kind of going to be a framework going forward. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, did anybody watch CNN or Fox tonight? I actually watched both. And I finally turned off the TV and we drove down here, and I wasn't feeling good. I mean, how could you? It doesn't matter what side you stand on. I felt like I was in different countries as I flipped the channels. Mm-hmm. And I think that people want something more and better than that. And I don't know what we do about it in Washington, but I know what we're doing about it here in Columbus. I think when I turn my local news on, I don't see that level of divisiveness. I think we hold each other to different standards. I think places like this are places where you see your neighbor, and I see a lot of you all. We don't all agree on every simple policy issue or complex policy issue, but we figure out how to get along. We figure out how to make progress. I think for companies, that's a notable attraction, that companies want to be in a place that are collaborative, that are civil, that know how to get things done. Mm-hmm. And so civility is more than just acting nice. Civility is being able to both act nice, but also get things done. It doesn't mean that you can't be disagreeable. I mean, Kenny and I were yelling at each other this morning. That didn't mean we weren't civil, and it didn't mean that we weren't taking those energies into productive talents. Mm-hmm. I think it's very marketable. When I talk to CEOs that Kenny brings to town, they're intrigued by a city that's big enough to have scale and small enough to still have rooms like this that are committed to get things done. So I think it does matter. I think it's more than just a marketing gimmick. By the way, we've been talking about this for a lot longer than some of the challenges have been going on in recent times in Washington.
So, Kenny, what were you arguing about this morning?
You had one question.
Well, what about this market?
We're arguing over posters.
Exclamation points. And let's talk about the marketing of Columbus. You've been at this for 10 years. Is the message getting through nationally, internationally about Columbus because we have a well-known lack of a reputation in some quarters?
Well, what Alex is talking about is actually a pretty good lead into that. So we are working with Brookings. We've worked with Brookings for about 6 years on a variety of groups, and we do it in cohort groups of other cities. And cities have this ambition to be known for things, right? And how do you go about doing that? Some have defined themselves through a tagline as Music City or this or that, and that worked for a while. But it's a noisy world in the to gain any voice in economic development. Mm-hmm. There's cities all over the world that are saying we're this or we're that. I think it's a pretty interesting approach to go to market and say this is what we stand for and this is what we're going to be about. And if you become part of the community, whether you're a new leader moving to take over the reins of a company that exists here already, or you're moving a major operation here, right. To sit down with leadership groups, maybe multiple leadership groups that are all saying the same thing. We have a bent for public-private partnerships. We are going to debate, and we're going to do it civilly. We respect each other, and when it comes time to get things done, we get them done, and we do things, we lock arms and get things done. Right. That's a pretty interesting approach to take out to the world. Now, that's not perfectly defined, but I think that might be the way that we start to raise our game a little bit more. We certainly made huge progress, not only in how we've marketed, but as our airport has grown. And our university has extended its reach around the world. There's very few places that we land and do marketing. I see our team from Japan is in the audience today. Brian, who reaches out to companies across Japan. People know Ohio State there because they've made investments in Japan. We leverage that brand, right? And so, I think we're doing some of the right things, but a lot of work to do on accomplishing that, Columbus without the Ohio, and getting our brand to be not just across the U.S., but around the world.
When we get feet on the street, we still always win.
Okay.
We change hearts every time anybody visits this city. And so it's still a challenge, but and still an untapped opportunity. But the great news is get talent in Columbus, whether it's young talent or a CEO, you always change the hearts of their impressions of our city.
Sure. Okay. All right. Anybody who has questions, you can start lining up back there. And while we're doing that, Kenny, I will ask you, when, in God's name, are we going to hear from Amazon?
Well, I was on a panel yesterday with Alex as well, and the same question came up. And I'll just say what it could be considered an accomplishment.
Yeah,
in some
right.
ways. I don't like to just be on lists and, have moral victories. We're here to get things done. But when he was having conversations about the future of the region before I moved here, we weren't talking about anything like that. I don't think that was in the wildest aspiration. And number two, we probably couldn't have done it anyway. Mm-hmm. And I think both are possible now. I also think that it's very instructive for us to think about the world we live in, where a company can actually have a project and say they're going to create 50,000 jobs in addition to the 100,000 in one place. Mm-hmm. That causes you to think about what kind of, do you want it? How would we approach it? Right. All of those things. But it's a fascinating world that we live in economic development these days.
Yeah.
That competition will pay dividends for decades to come. The lessons that we've learned about how we have to be prepared. Projects are getting bigger. They're getting more complex, and it's been a great learning exercise, and we're never in it not to win. Mm-hmm. But in this instance, that competition being shortlisted, being on further shortlist, has been nothing short of a big victory for Columbus.
I like how it really has shown a light on quality of life more than any other project that I've ever seen.
It was an example of feet on the street absolutely winning. I think it'd be fair to say that many in that company knew our city very well. They've got some of the largest investments of any company in our city, but there were others who didn't. And as they've hit our streets and met with our leaders, as you drop them off at the airport, that they're going back to Seattle very, very impressed.
Okay. But still, we have no idea when they're going to make this decision. All right, please state your name and let us know what your question is.
All right, good evening. I'm Kathy Fox with the Pizzuti Companies, and I'm a past chair of the CMC board and so proud of what this organization has done. My question relates to some of the topics we've had at CMC this year. One of them was related to artificial intelligence and how it's going to change the nature of jobs in the future. So my question is, we have built an economy that has a substantial component in logistics, a lot of entry-level jobs with not necessarily high pay, and a lot of those jobs are going to be lost as logistics changes, as warehousing and the nature of those jobs becomes automated more so. So what should we be doing to train the workforce that's here for 2030 and the jobs of the future?
There's just incredible urgency in aligning our efforts and the kind of jobs that are being created out of our existing pipeline and what's being predicted of the research that we're doing with our educational partners, our workforce partners. It used to be that we could take for granted that the jobs would be relatively the same and, people would get trained up and do that. It's changing pretty rapidly. You build them, but I would challenge you, go visit them after the clients move into them. Sometimes there's very few people in them already, and a massive amount of technology that's surrounding them. And you have to be a fairly sophisticated employee, and some of the wages actually are starting to really reflect that. So that industry is changing pretty rapidly too. But yes, huge challenges for the economic development and workforce development professions to come together like never before in the next 5-10 years.
Artificial intelligence, just Google Duvall's Dance Columbus, and you'll see that the leaders in the world in artificial intelligence will be with Mark Kwame in a conference that Kenny and our teams are co-hosting, talking about the future. I mean, we've got to ask ourselves a question, who's the disruption going to hit? Which retailer won't be in business? Which insurance company won't exist? Which financial services back office operations are going to go away? We're not going to avoid it, and so we've got to confront it. We've got to attack it. We've got to drive it. Another program here at the CMC, J.D. Vance and Hillbilly Elegy. I mean, my takeaway of his work is truly about, are we educating and building the bridges for those that are on the other side of the economic divide? And are we going to give them a pathway back? Smart cities, we're going to displace drivers, #1 job in America over the next, is it 10 years, 15 years? All of these issues are coming at us really, really quick. And so we've got to attack them. We've got to deal with them. The key is certainly going to lie in education, training, workforce. It's not just the Ohio State University, Columbus State, K-12, all of it working more closely together.
Thank you.
Thank
All right,
you.
next question.
Hi, Ron Sachs, Emeritus Professor at CCAD. I just want to start just commending you guys that this is just tremendous growth that has happened under your leadership. And before asking a question, I just have to express that. My question, even though I have my own ideas about it, this is for Alex because I already asked it of Kenny, and he told me I should definitely ask you. There has been so much accomplished over the past 10 years, past 8 years. Columbus 2020 is just less than a year and a half away. What are the plans to publicly celebrate what the accomplishments have been?
Yeah, great. Yeah, well, I did say that we've learned how to win, or that we're having a winning attitude, but a piece of winning is celebrating. But this was one piece of it. Would we dare to come up and brag a little bit, maybe cry a little bit, and, pat ourselves on the back? Not just ourselves, but the community. I think there are going to be opportunities throughout the next year to continue to maybe raise our, shadow just a little bit and be a little bolder in helping the community celebrate this amazing success that we've seen. I think it's an important part of the ingredients. The day that Kenny came in, we happened to have a partnership meeting, and we popped several corks of champagne at that meeting, in a toast to Columbus. So it can come in small ways, private ways, and there are probably some bigger community celebrations that we've been thinking about and talking about. How do you tell the story of where we've come? Not just to tell it to celebrate, but to learn from it so that we can replicate it.
And to, like you said, this is, the end of the beginning. Use it to catapult us into the next decade.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Well, good evening. As the newest board member here at CMC, I also want to thank you, Alex and Kenny, for not only your leadership, but tonight for sharing your vision for the future for not only this region, but the state as a whole. So thank you for being here today. So first off, I have to admit my ears sort of perked up as, you know, I'm the vice president at COSI, Center of Science and Industry, for those of you in the room who aren't aware.
Great event today, by the way.
Thank you so much. But when we talked about AI and science and technology, my ears perked up because I agree. I think workforce is going to be really critical moving forward. But my question is about diversity in our approach in our portfolio when it comes to industry sectors. You know, one of the things that I think Central Ohio has been really great, I saw the screen you highlighted there, Kenny, around all of our sister cities and similarly situated around the Midwest. One of the things I think Columbus and our region is unique is that we're so diversified. Logistics, advanced manufacturing, medical, R&D, I can keep going down the list. So as you look out 8 years, 10 years from now, are there a couple industry sectors that you're looking at from a prioritization standpoint, or do you think we're going to keep it broad and keep it diversified to help us withstand some of those waves that might be coming in the future?
Maybe several ways to look at that. We're blessed with a bunch of very large operations, and we have the luxury of that. Thousands of people work. More people work in companies of over 1,000 people in our region than almost any other city in the country. There's just 3 or 4 other cities where we have this many big companies and big operations, from Chase to Nationwide to AAP, Cardinal, and these companies. We're really blessed with them, some of which started here and were startups at one point, lest we forget. If I think about in the future, the 2 things, not industry-driven, but maybe platform-driven, is what's probably going to win in the next 10 years, I don't know about the next 100, is technology-driven growth in all industries, including our major ag sectors and things like that, if I think about our entire region, and those companies that can compete globally and do business globally. So we have to get more connected to the world in lots of ways, and that means we have to have more global companies here. Hopefully that will lead to things like direct flights to Asia, to Europe, from our soil too. So if we can create more global companies, more tech-driven companies, and quite frankly, just more business starts in our region. We need more people taking risk and actually starting up a company and opening up a restaurant or, you know, an economic-based business every day in our region. We got to make it incredibly easy for them to do that if we're going to have enough velocity of growth. We certainly have the population growth to support it. Dr. Lafayette talks about this every year. We lag in small business starts. We got to start getting at that and unleashing some of that. But I think tech and global are going to be the 2 drivers of every industry, and then we have to feed off of that.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, I think we have time for 2 more. All right, go ahead.
My name is Aaron Leventhal. I produced the German Village Oktoberfest for the German Village Society for 15 years, and I published a magazine called High Street Neighborhoods. When you made the statement, we don't want to be Los Angeles, New York, whatever, we want to be uniquely Columbus, what comes to mind is the people that I talk to along these urban neighborhoods that are involved with living, working in these neighborhoods. And the feedback is the city is crushing long-time landmarks to build 15, 20-story buildings up and down the street. They're not listening to the fact that people love what was, and they want to hold on to it, and no one's listening. When the Short North speaks and the North Market says we're building a 35-story building in our parking lot, no one listens. And my question to you is, Where does this fit in your continuum of great growth and great vision? The person that's living here and doesn't want necessarily to be a Chicago.
Yeah, no, I love this question, and I appreciate your passion. And by the way, German Village, one of the great historic districts in the country, and you go to Italian Village, or you go over to Grandview, where I live, or you go out to Granville, where we were at lunch just a couple of weeks ago. I love the fact that our region is made up of these great places. And when I talk about Columbus in the 22nd century, and I talk about long-range master planning, I think one of the key questions, one of the reasons you ask that question is, are we going to both preserve while we're growing? And, you know, it may not be about one particular building, but a philosophy that says, can you have it both? Can you have both? Because if you can, and I believe that you can, if you plan for it and you're thoughtful, if you can both grow and you can preserve this unique character, I think that's a differential. And if it's a differential, then you want to plan for it. So when you hear me talking about the 22nd century, you're talking about long-range master planning, it's in part to say we've got to preserve that great diversity of neighborhoods and lifestyles that we have in the city.
All right, I wasn't going to cut you off, but he said to let you go, so
It's going to be a quick question,
All right.
so a little bit of a two-parter. But how important for cultural growth, okay, is both our museums and our music and our culture, arts and entertainment, sports, is that to sustaining our international and national reputation? And does Amazon want to own an MLS franchise?
So we're fighting hard for the MLS, and we're increasingly in partnership with them. I think there is an opportunity here, and we'll keep working it. The arts really do matter. That's why the Columbus Partnership and the Columbus Foundation commissioned the Future of the Arts study that said, among other things, that we need to increase public funding, and so the discussion on that matters, and we need to be paying attention to it. We can do all of the above. That's kind of my punchline. You know, we can keep a soccer team. You know, we can support the arts. We can drive growth. We can maintain neighborhoods. And by the way, none of the above, you know, you can substitute one out. It's not going to be the end of it. But aren't we a city that now is big enough to aspire that we can multitask, that we can have excellence across all aspects of our community? And so whether it's professional sports or the arts or economic development or a great library, and all the way down the list, I think we can do all of the above, and we should aspire to do all of the above.
So Amazon does not want to buy a soccer team, is that what you're saying?
Go crew. Kenny,
We do have people who do.
yes. Good. I hope so. Kenny emailed me a few months ago and asked if there might be a possibility of doing something with CMC to talk about where Columbus 2020 is now and what the future is. And I said, are you kidding me? What date do you want? And then we realized it would make the perfect annual meeting for Columbus Metropolitan Club. So please join me in thanking Doug Buchanan, CMC lifetime members, Alex Fischer and Kenny McDonald. Our sponsors for the evening, the Dispatch Media Group, Plant Moran, American Dairy Association, Honda, Columbus Business First, Shoemaker Luke Kendrick, and Southwest Airlines. Oh, wait. Southwest Airlines has a special announcement. And here is Southwest, don't you love this title, Above the Wing Supervisor, Barry Cack. Barry, what's up?
Thanks.
You get a flag.
Thank you, Jane. Good evening, everybody. Southwest Airlines is very pleased to be a supporter of the Columbus Metropolitan Club and applauds you for your efforts. 26 years ago, Southwest Airlines joined the Columbus community and began serving Columbus with 7 daily departures to St. Louis and Chicago's Midway Airport. Fast forward to 2018, Southwest Airlines is up to 42 daily departures to 19 different cities. In 2017, we flew nearly 2.8 million total enplaned and deplaned customers into Columbus, driving about $1.3 billion in economic activity and supporting nearly 6,400 jobs in Columbus. Additionally, in 2017, Southwest championed our communities by investing $132,000 of cash and tickets and 1,400 volunteer hours from the local employees, impacting 35 Columbus community organizations, while 4 Southwest pilots mentored 239 Columbus region 5th graders, students in the Adopt a Pilot program. All these successes are due to part of the support from the community partners, customers, and nearly 200 dedicated Southwest employees. I'd like to recognize some of my teammates that are here this evening, so if you could all stand up. I'd like to recognize Katie Kagi, Chrissy Glass, Debbie Glander, Marcia Piazza, and Roxanne Gibson. Our leader, Tim Kavanaugh, would like to send his best tonight. He could not attend tonight's festivities. In fact, our Columbus station, while serving you, has won several honors, including Midsize Station of the Year in 2016 and Baggage Service Office of the Year in 2012, 13, and 17. As you can see, there is a lot to celebrate as we join in our partnership with the Columbus Metropolitan Club. So today, in celebration of our 26 years at John Glenn Columbus International Airport, Southwest would like to give away 26 $100 Southwest Airlines gift cards with no expiration date and valid for any of our 99 destinations, plus our 10 additional countries that we service. So I'm going to ask you to simply take a look at the forum flyer that's on your seats. And on the top right-hand corner, in the back, if there is a Southwest heart on the top right-hand side, you are the lucky recipients of the gift card. If I could have all of you stand up.
Yeah. Very nice.
As you exit, stop by the registration desk and show your sticker to receive your Southwest Airlines gift card. Congratulations, and thank you all for having us.
So 26 of you have a very special celebration. We'll be interested in knowing where your gift certificate takes you. Lainey has those gift certificates for you back at our CMC umbrella back there. And Barry, if you want to go back and join Lainey, you can meet the folks that won their certificates. So thank you very much again, Southwest. That's very, very generous of you. Thank you all for being here. It's been a really fun evening, but it's not over yet. Anna and the Consequences are going to kick up the band. The bar's open till 8:30, so relax and enjoy the beautiful view and the pride we share in Columbus. Good night.